All right, Battletech enthusiasts, if you've been following my channel for any amount of time, if you've been exploring the Battletech content on my blog, and the link is underneath this podcast that'll take you to my blog, you know the two things that I love in Battletech and in war games. I love tanks, I love big guns. And part of my wargaming philosophy, in addition to kind of personal glory and as much tabletop glory as we can get, big guns never tire. You can have your fancy plans, you can have your tactical formations, you can have multiple units doing multiple things. You can't argue against big guns. You can't argue against big boom boom on the table. So in this unit, in this vlog, in this podcast, exploring the Demolisher tank, this tank is extremely seductive to me. It's a tank, it has heavy armor, and it has big guns. So how are we going to utilize this on the table? Tactically, how are we going to do our best to minimize the limitations of this tank? Because it's got a lot of duality in here. It's a very powerful piece, a very strong tank. It's naturally going to attract a lot of hate from your opponent. And I can't blame them. They're going to have to target it. They're going to have to take it out. They have to. But how are we going to try to keep it alive and use it as best we can? All right, so the Demolisher tank. We've got a tank with heavy armor, 2 autocannon 20s. I mean, just saying that, I'm getting pumped. I'm getting jazzed up. 2 autocannon 20s on a turret. Much like the Shrek PPC carrier, the turret is an important piece with this. I put down 2 to 4 Demolishers in a game, and we utilize them. The first thing with the Demolisher is we need some sort of redundancy. Or if I'm going to take just one, I need to have some other supporting units in there. Not that we're going to not have supporting units if we're taking 2, 3, or 4, but one of anything in a war game really puts you at risk. And the challenge with the Demolisher, like every tank, motive hits. It's not a fast tank. It's not a slow tank. But given the range of the autocannon 20, given the fact that it is lethal to any mech, we have to try and keep those motive hits down. We have to try and get it into position. We have to try and see how it plays on there. And we're going to try to utilize the fact that the opponent might bring some assault mechs. They bring 2 Stalkers and an Atlas, and they're feeling pretty good. You put down 4 Demolishers, they're going to take notice. That Atlas pilot, those Stalker pilots, they're going to take notice. They cannot eat 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 autocannon 20 shots a turn going on one mech. How do we bring that? So the main challenge with this tank is the short range nature of it. So you are either going to need to be able to play it super defensively, castling up, bringing your opponent to you, or ultra aggressively on there, getting it into a key position turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, so that as it comes under fire and it takes motive hits, you're playing with the assumption that it is going to become immobilized at some point, hopefully later in the game rather than sooner, but it needs to be in a position so that when it is immobilized, we've got that 360 fire radius, even though it's a short radius, with the turret that can spin. Now let's talk about playing on a hex map as an example for it, because a lot of us play on hex maps. The hex map is a little bit smaller. If I'm playing defensively with the tank, the Demolisher makes a great bodyguard type tank. I play 2 to 4 longbows. I play 2 to 4 archers depending on the game. I have a spotter with some locusts. I have some LRM carriers. I am raining down hundreds and hundreds of indirect fire missiles per turn on there. No opponent's going to let this happen. You're sending something in to deal with it. And let's say it's not air support right now. If we were playing with air support, I'd probably bring some partisan tanks or some air defense on that layer. So let's just say ground for now. You're sending something in. Even if the battle is elsewhere, even if we've got other mechs kind of engaged in the center of the table, you're sending something in to deal with that in the back, to bust up my back lines. You park some Demolishers there. This is an example of bringing your opponent to the Demolisher tank. I'm going to try and hide it. I'm going to try and get it behind some cover. I'm going to try and get it behind some line of blocking sight. And then as you get into range to deal with my longbows or whatever this fire base is going to be, it could even be artillery, then we're going to send out the Demolishers on you, and we're going to try and make you eat those autocannon 20s. Playing very, very conservative, very, very defensively. Now, sometimes a map doesn't allow you to do that, or sometimes the mission doesn't allow you to do that. In this case, when we're super aggressive, again, we're looking at a hex map, I want to get those Demolishers to the center of the map as quickly as I can. That doesn't mean I'm just sending one or two out alone unsupported, because they're going to get torrented down. Your opponent's 4, 5, 6 mechs, tanks, whatever, they're going to focus fire everything into those tanks, and they're just going to get chewed up. I'm going to have other units advancing. I'm going to have other things in play, and my opponent may or may not shoot at the Demolishers. I'm going to try and force them to shoot at other mechs, force them to make a choice, and we'll talk about that choice in a second tactically. But while this is happening, I want to get the Demolishers to the middle of the hex map. Imagine 2 Demolishers spaced 3 or 4 hexes in the center. If we draw a bubble of hexes around, tracing out the maximum range of the autocannons, the AC-20s, on the 360-degree turret, you walk into that bubble, you're under threat. And if I'm in the center of the table, that means there's less that you can avoid. If I put those 2 Demolishers over on the right side of the table, that means if you're on the left side of the table, you can just squeak by. The hex map, you're just going to squeak right by. I'm not going to have the range. For the most part, if I'm in the center, you're going to have the range on me, and I'm going to have it on you. So this, as you move by to get into my deployment zone or my missions, so if I get immobilized, they turn into a big gun pillbox. And again, not that I want them to get immobilized, but I need to take into account that possibility might happen. Now let's talk about kind of a choice on here. I'm moving up a Demolisher tank. We're going to kind of keep it a little simple. I've got a Demolisher and I've got a Jenner. I'm moving that Demolisher up the center of the table. And, maybe you have a rifleman or maybe you have some other mech that can engage both units. I'm going to run that Jenner up the left or right side of the hex map table on there. You now have a choice. Do you start shooting at the Demolisher? Get me crossing off some bubbles, some armor bubbles. I'm going to get forward armor on there, so you're going to have to chew through a lot, but hey, it's good to get started. You might get lucky. You might score some crits, but you're going to start chewing up some motive hits on there too, possibly. If you do that, that lets the Jenner get into your backfield, and you're going to have the speed of the Jenner, the medium lasers, the missiles just kind of running amok back there. Do you focus on the Jenner, and that allows my Demolisher to come up. So this is kind of a wargaming tactical example of the tank as it's moving up. Other things need to be happening tactically. It's not just like, oh, I'm running up my Demolisher and an Orion next to it. Well, okay, I can really let the Orion keep coming and focus on the Demolisher. You need to tactically affect the game by having 2 separate threads running on there. That's, in my opinion, the key way to use this. Now let's talk about some secondary features of the Demolisher. Some units work well anywhere. Some units work well in open terrain, like hover units, things like that. And certain units really love city fight. The Demolisher works well in mixed terrain or medium density terrain. Light terrain, less options on there. But you can kind of supplement those options again by having secondary mechs or secondary units working. The Demolisher loves city fight because you have chances to hide in buildings, you have chances to ambush, you have chances where you're moving up and down streets. A very building dense means you have to move down one street, cut across another, cut down another. It's very easy to get that Demolisher into close range, to get that up there on your opponent without suffering a lot of fire on the way in. So much like certain mechs are amplified in an urban environment, the Demolisher absolutely excels in it. How I like to use it tactically is as a way to clear buildings. So I have my core mechs advancing on my opponent. I've got screens of infantry. I find this in an attack versus defense mission when I have to take a city and my opponent is well dug in, they're well fortified. The Demolisher is an excellent, excellent siege breaker. Now imagine you're defending a city. You're going to have tanks in there. You're going to have mechs in there. You're going to have infantry in all sorts of buildings. You're going to have stuff hidden behind buildings. Even if I'm aware that it's there, we're not playing with hidden units, let's say for the sake of this. If you have medium and heavy mechs hidden 2 or 3 ranks behind buildings and you've got infantry screens everywhere, that's tough to walk into, right? That is really tough to walk into. Of course I'm going to approach. Yes, I'm going to try and use indirect fire. But with a team of Demolisher tanks, you can bring down a hardened building. You can bring down a tough building in one round of shooting. In 1, 2, 3 rounds, I will clear out a pocket of the city. I will strip away some of those buildings that you're using to hide, that you're using to cover, that you're using to run and gun from. We'll just level that. I find it a great way to kind of level and create entry points into the city, denying cover, denying places to tactically withdraw, denying the use of buildings and the very city tech against my opponent. I'm not wasting mech fire and mech mobility, and I'm not sinking tons and tons and tons of shots into a building to try and bring down the structure points to make it collapse. You hit it with, 2 AC-20s. 3 or 4 AC-20s. And again, with the tank getting close enough, the bonus modifiers to hitting a building because of its size and it's not moving, I don't want to say it's an auto hit, because in any war game, especially Battletech, when you're like, I'm going to hit this on anything but snake eyes, I don't want to tempt the dice gods because you'll roll those snake eyes when you need it. But taking that into account, most of the time, 98% of the time, 99% of the time, that Demolisher is going to hit. Using it tactically for urban redevelopment, I find works really, really well. So is the Demolisher an auto-include in your list? Again, I love big guns. I love tanks. Picking up 2, they come 2 in a pack. A lot of versatility in there. A lot of things you can do. Scales up in low battle value to high battle value games. I won't say you're going to use it in every game. Although in my one mercenary company, I do use them in every single game. But it's definitely a piece that you're going to get a lot of use out of. And it's definitely a piece that, in a good way, is going to attract massive amounts of hate from your opponent.